While waiting in line at a coffee establishment, I was distractedly browsing through my phone when a notification appeared on the screen, Mom. A familiar tightness wrapped around my ribs as my stomach squeezed. I paused. Talking to my mother was a never-ending ballet of silent disappointments and high aspirations. Nevertheless, I always harbored the hope that today would be different, and that she would say something kind. I gave the message a tap. She's a pathetic disappointment. She embarrasses the family. I can't believe we have to keep pretending she's successful when she's nothing but a burden, I gasped. The phone made my fingers shake. I wasn't intended to receive the communication. It has to do with me. 3 dots emerged a second later. Then a second message appeared. Oh, sorry, honey. That wasn't meant for you. Just ignore it. Disregard it? Disregard it? The blood in my face started to run out. I was so taken aback that I hardly noticed the barista requesting my order. I felt as though I had been pulled out of my own world and thrust into a mean joke as the sounds around me faded into a faraway hum. I pivoted on my heel and departed. I hardly felt the chilly air outside slapping against my face. Those words kept repeating in my mind, which was spinning. A pitiful letdown. A load. I ought to have known. I ought to have anticipated it. My parents had never concealed their dissatisfaction from me. Their pride, their joy, the boy they had always desired. My older brother, Ethan, had been the golden kid growing up. He was gregarious, athletic, and naturally the focus of attention. The other one was me, the delicate, sentimental idealist who never fully fits into their idealized role. Their criticism had first been based on grades. Next, my professional decisions. Then, regarding my life decisions as I grew older. Even though I had established a prosperous financial profession and earned more money than Ethan ever did, it wasn't enough. I wasn't married. I had no children. They didn't want me to be that. But what's the true irony? Their mortgage was paid by me. I had been in charge for 4 years when my dad lost his work, and they began to struggle financially. Me. The pitiful letdown. At work, one had taken on more tasks. Reduce my personal spending. Every month, I wired them money. For what purpose? For me to be made fun of behind my back? To have my own mother make fun of me? Something broke inside of me. I was finished. I've tried. I'm done pleading for their blessing. They stabbed me in the back, and I'm done being their goddamn ATM. As I lay in bed that night with my phone screen still shining in the dark, a plan began to take shape in my head. I had no intention of arguing. I had no intention of crying. I intended to strike them in the painful spot. I proceeded to the automated transfers I had set up for their mortgage when I opened my banking app the following morning. I canceled them with a single tap. I was free in an instant. No more sending money to individuals who thought I was a complete embarrassment. My parents had made it quite evident that I would never be sufficient for them, therefore, I was done sacrificing my happiness for them. I texted after that. Hey, Mom, I saw your message. No need to explain, I get it. I wouldn't want to embarrass the family any further. So I'll be stepping back. Since I'm such a disappointment, you won't have to worry about my financial support anymore. Hope Ethan can pick up where I left off. Best of luck. I switched my phone to silent mode. Then I breathed for the first time in years. My phone was blowing up by midday. Mom, Dad, even Ethan. Voicemail after voicemail, call after call, as though my quiet was a mistake that needed to be corrected. Then the messages began to arrive. Mom, don't be theatrical, Linda. What I intended is not clear to you. Dad, this is immature. Give your mom a call back. Mom, you're not getting it? That money is essential. You cannot simply cut us off in this manner. Mom, get the phone, Linda. I didn't. Rather, I sipped my coffee at my desk at work and allowed a strange, foreign feeling of fulfillment to seep into my bones. I was in control for once. My voicemail was filled by the time I arrived home that night. The shrillness of my mother's voice was tinged with barely controlled anger. What's wrong with you, Linda? Are you simply going to leave us after everything we've done for you? Do you now believe that you are too good for your own family? I gave an eye roll. All of the things they had done for me? That was a lot of money. I was still wondering if I should answer at all when my phone rang again. It was Ethan. My brother and I had a complex but generally amicable relationship, in contrast to my parents. Unlike them, he wasn't overtly harsh, but he wasn't an ally either. After hesitating, I responded, Linda, he moaned, as though he was tired of the whole thing. What on earth is happening? Dad is angry, and Mom is going crazy. Are you genuinely severing them in this way? My breath came out sharply. Did she explain why to you? She claimed that you were upset about a certain text. I burst out laughing without amusement. Oh, I see. A little text. Ethan let out a grunt. You know how Mom is. So come on. That wasn't how she meant it. This is getting bigger than it needs to be because of you. I gripped the phone more tightly. Ethan, tell me something. How recently did you send them a dime? Quiet. That's what I thought, I added in a chilly tone. I've been the one keeping them afloat for the past 4 years. And behind my back? They say I'm pathetic. I humiliate them, they say. Do you also believe that I'm exaggerating this? More quiet. Then a deep, lengthy sigh. At last, he said, Look, will you at least stop by? They wish to speak. I let out a slow breath. I was already aware of this. They were unwilling to provide an apology. They had no desire to put things right. They wanted me to reconsider. Perhaps, however, it was time to confront them. With a firm voice, I responded, I'll be there tomorrow. However, Ethan, yes? I have one thing to tell them. What? I grinned to myself. Inform them that I'm not here to plead for their favor. I have come to show them the consequences of biting the hand that feeds you. The following night, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel at home when I was standing in front of my parents' house, which I had been paying for. It had the feel of a battlefield. I straightened my shoulders, took a big breath, and pressed the doorbell. The door opened almost immediately. Mom. Her forced concern tightened her cheeks, but her eyes? Fear. Anger. Anger. Linda, she uttered in a lovely, syrupy voice that was strained at the edges. At last. Enter. With my shoes clicking on the gleaming wooden floor, I entered. Dad was already in his favorite armchair, his mouth clenched and his arms folded. With his hands in his pockets and his back to the wall, Ethan watched the events unfold as if they were a cheesy family drama on television. I didn't sit down. Mom let out a big sigh and closed the door behind me. I'm not sure what's bothering you, Linda, but this little stunt of yours, I extended a hand. Stop the behavior. She obviously didn't expect me to be this direct, as her mouth moved back and forth. Dad sighed in annoyance. All right, just let's get started. Will you clean up this mess or not? I gave a harsh chuckle. You mean your mess, I see. Dad's expression hardened. Because the fact was that I no longer saw how this was my problem, especially when Mom thought I was nothing more than a pitiful letdown. Mom winced. Ethan rubbed his temples and moaned. There was a miscommunication, she said hastily. That's not how I meant it. I folded my arms. Oh? What did you mean specifically? Silence for a beat. Then, predictably, she changed strategies. She placed a hand on my arm and stepped closer, cooing. Sweetheart, we are related. Sometimes families say things they don't mean. However, we must go past this. We must help one another. You've always done that, haven't you? My stomach turned over. Encourage one another? I had forfeited holidays, did not indulge in luxury, put in more effort simply to stay afloat. And now, out of the blue, they wanted to discuss supporting each other? I withdrew my arm. You're amazing. Mom's face became sour. Be reasonable, Linda. That money was what we relied on. We require it. I cocked my head. And the reason for my issue is, Dad lost his temper. Damn it, because we are your parents? Following all that we have done for you, I blinked. I spoke in a calm but poisonous tone. Oh? What have you done for me? What exactly have you done for me, Dad? Tell me. He wiggled his jaw. Mom moved apprehensively. We brought you up, she stumbled. I fed you. Provide a roof for yourself? I laughed a little, without humor. Congratulations. That is the absolute minimum that a parent should do. Ethan let out a loud sigh. He was aware of my correctness. I looked at Mom. Have you ever expressed your pride in me? Did you ever agree with my decisions? Quiet. Rather, she made a tight, phony smile. Honey, Linda, we didn't mean, I interrupted her. Every word you said was meant. Silence for another beat. Then I revealed the shocking information. The house is for sale. The room exploded. Mom's eyes widened. Dad leaped to his feet, waves of anger erupting from him. That is not possible! Mom let out a cry. This is where we call home. I crossed my arms. No, Mother, I call it home. I have been making mortgage payments. My name is the title. It is legally mine. Oh, shit, Ethan mumbled to himself. Dad's face flushed. You unappreciative little, I interrupted him. I don't lack gratitude. I just finished, and I saw it for the first time in my life. They were afraid. Since I'm not there, they had nothing. Mom's face twisted in betrayal, as if I had just told her that I was burning her whole life to the ground. She repeated, her voice breaking. This is our home, as though reality could be altered by sheer denial. I didn't wince. No, Mother, I own it. Dad's face was a hideous shade of crimson, and his fists were clenched at his sides. Would you truly evict your own parents, following all that we have done for you? I let out a breath through my nose. I was thrown out first by you, perhaps not physically, but on an emotional level. I had never been accommodated, never took me for who I was, never showed me affection for my current self. Mom shook her head, scoffed, and clutched the side of the kitchen counter as if it were her lifeline. Linda, where are we meant to go? Not only do we lack savings, but we also lack. I gave a shrug. It's not my problem. As if I had slapped her, she gasped. Ethan said in a low, unsure voice. Linda, you don't have to do this. I raised my eyebrows as I turned to face him. Will you assist them? He paused. I learned everything from that hesitation. I believe so, I muttered. Mom started crying loud, dramatic sobbing, as if she were trying out for an Oscar. This is unfair, she sobbed, holding her chest tight. You were raised by us, your parents, I interrupted, and I paid for your life for 4 years. You continued to refer to me as a burden. Dad stepped forward, his voice low and menacing. You're going to regret this. My voice was chilly as I looked him in the eyes. No, Father, you will. I walked over to the door. I whispered over my shoulder. You have 1 month until the sale is finalized. Come up with a solution. I left after saying that. The quiet before the storm, I anticipated mayhem. I anticipated yelling, threats, and dramatic phone calls, pleading with me to change my mind. Instead, there was stillness. My phone wasn't ringing from my mother's incessant demands for the first time in years. No messages that make you feel guilty, no frantic voicemails. However, I knew that this was not the end. Neither of my parents was one to take loss lightly. They had a plan. I simply had no idea what it was. After a week, my phone rang when I was at work. Mom. I let the voicemail go. Another call a minute later. Then another. I sighed and picked up by the third. What? Through the call, her voice was heavy with phony relief. Oh, my goodness, my love. We must speak. I remained silent. She assumed that my silence gave her the all clear to go on. Listen, honey, she whispered in a lovely syrupy voice. We've been considering it, and we're aware that things went awry. However, we are a family, and families never desert one another. I laughed a little dryly. It's funny. Considering that the minute I didn't fit your ideal little mold, you left me. Mom let out a loud sigh. Please, Linda. Now is not the time to harbor resentment. We're having problems. It was there, the true purpose behind her call. What sort of issue? I inquired, knowing the answer beforehand. She paused, then exhaled a trembling breath. The bank. The home. They're traveling more quickly than we anticipated. We might soon be without a place to go. I remained silent. And we were hoping that maybe you'd let us stay with you, she added cautiously. Only for a short time. It nearly made me chuckle. Nearly. Did they truly believe that they could use me, degrade me, and then simply waltz back into my life whenever they needed something? No. A long silence. Then she broke her mask. With anger in her voice, she yelled, Linda, your parents are us. How do you regard us after all that we have done for you? I gave an eye roll. You mean the way you handled me? Behind my back calling me a pitiful embarrassment? You hardly recognized me, and you expected me to pay for your whole way of life? It was an error, she yelled. It wasn't intended for you, I told you. All I was doing was venting. Oh, I retorted, so that's okay? As long as I don't hear it, is it acceptable to disparage me? quiet. Then she spoke in a softer, more frantic tone. There is nowhere else for us to go, Linda. I inhaled deeply and slowly. It was this, the time when I would have caved in as the desperate, want to please daughter I used to be. However, I was no longer her. I owed them nothing. With a firm voice, I stated, "That's not my problem." The receiver made a stifled noise. "This cannot be done to us." I let out a sigh. "I'm not harming you in any way. I'm just selecting myself at last." I hung up after saying that. The last action, my phone rang once more the following morning. Not your mother. No, Dad. The real estate broker. Linda, she uttered slowly. Your parents, they're not leaving. I squeezed my nasal bridge. They are, of course. She went on. They're saying they have squatters' rights. Additionally, they claim that it is illegal to evict them. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. This was what they were actually doing. All right. Did they wish to act shady? I would too. After 3 days, I pulled up to the house on the morning of the last walkthrough. However, I wasn't by myself. I had my attorney with me, as well as the cops. On the porch, with their arms folded and their faces contorted in rage, Mom and Dad were waiting for me. As the officers drew closer, Dad spat. This is ridiculous! You can't simply dismiss us in this manner! I displayed the signed documents. I can, in fact. Mom's big eyes begged as she turned to face one of the officers. You're not getting it. This is our house. We've spent 20 years here. The policeman gave a head shake. I apologize, MAM, but this property is not yours. Notice has been sent to you. You must go. Dad's fists clenched. However, he was aware. Nothing more could be done. They were defeated. As I stood there with my arms folded, I observed their faces black with shame and rage as they packed their final luggage. Mom stopped at the door and gave me one more glance. This is something you'll regret, she growled. I looked her in the eye, totally unmoved. No, Mother, I won't. And I didn't. I experienced a feeling I hadn't had in years, the removal of my parents from my life and my finances. Calm. My life was quiet for the first time in years. No more calls requesting payment. No more guilt trips masquerading as maternal care. Feeling like an ATM rather than a daughter is over. My parents had been officially absent from the house for a week. Chaos was what I had anticipated, Mom calling in a rage, Dad making absurd threats, and Ethan attempting to mediate. However, I received quiet instead. It was nearly worse than that, because I was acquainted with them. They were not the kind to concede a loss. They had a plan. I knew the call was coming. A week went by, then another. I poured myself into my work, my apartment, and my newly discovered tranquility. I no longer carried the burden I had for years. No more unending sacrifices. No more giving money to folks who thought I was a complete failure. Then my phone rang one afternoon. Mom. I let the voicemail go. Another call a minute later. Then another. I sighed and picked up by the third. What? The breath on the other end was unsteady. Then it's Mom, Linda. I said nothing. She assumed that my silence gave her the all clear to go on. Honey, there is nowhere for us to go. It was there. The reality. She wasn't making an apology call. She wasn't trying to correct the situation by calling. She was in a difficult situation. I remained silent. We attempted to stay with Ethan, but she laughed bitterly. He refused to house us. Do you think that's possible? I could, for it was Ethan who never accepted responsibility. I had always been like that. However, it is no longer the case. Her voice faltering now, she added, We've been staying at a motel, but we can't afford it much longer. Linda, your father isn't doing well. I shut my eyes. That line would have put me into a tailspin at one point, when the idea of Dad having trouble would have made me want to repair it and give up my life for them. However, it is no longer the case. I don't have that problem, I answered plainly. A pause. Her voice then broke. Please, Linda, it was there, the pleading. Because she had never needed to. She had never done it before. I leaned back on my couch and groaned. I said, I gave you everything for years. And in exchange, I was termed pathetic by you. A load. A source of shame. That was a mistake, she said as she hurried away. No, Mom, I interrupted. It wasn't an error. It was the reality. You meant everything you said. You simply didn't anticipate being apprehended. She gave a sharp breath, as though my words had struck her physically. She then dealt the last card. Linda, I am your mother. I laughed without humor. Indeed, I'm your daughter too. But until you lost the house, that didn't seem to matter. Quiet. Then she asked, So that's it? In a hushed tone, you're simply letting us suffer? And there it was. The trip of guilt. The final, last-ditch effort to make me feel guilty for advocating for myself. I inhaled deeply. I then spoke in the most composed tone I could manage. I won't abandon you to your misery. All I'm doing is refusing to go through your pain. Then, I ended the call. The surprising disclosure, a week went by. Then another, no phone calls, no messages. I wasn't anxious about my phone for the first time in my life. Then, one night, my phone buzzed while I was preparing dinner. Unknown figure. I paused, then responded, Linda? I went cold. Ethan was the one. A beat skipped in my chest. Months had passed since our previous conversation. With caution, I said, Hey, what's going on? A long sigh. Then I just wanted to say that I now understand. I scowled. What do you get? Dad and Mom, he whispered. Everything you mentioned regarding them, all of the things you attempted to alert me to. You were correct. I crossed my arms and leaned against the counter. What took place? One more sigh. Then I heard a confession I never expected to hear. He acknowledged, They came to me after you cut them off, pleading for assistance. I'm feeling guilty. Dad was behaving like I owed them something, and Mom was crying. Initially, I was on the verge of giving in. I shut my eyes. Mom's dramatic weeping, Dad's barely controlled anger, and the way they had always known just how to control us were all so vivid in my mind. Ethan went on, his voice rougher now, but then I realized something. Linda, they don't genuinely care about us. Not at all. To them, we are merely tools, materials. I refused them, and then I did. They betrayed me, similar to how they betrayed you. I let out a slow breath. You took too long. Ethan laughed a dry laugh. Indeed, I suppose I was due for that. I said nothing. After a while, he said, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for not having your back sooner, for allowing you to bear everything by yourself. I ought to have defended you, and I didn't. Something relaxed in my chest. I had never truly been close to Ethan. He had always been the ideal child, the one who embodied the idealized version of our parents. But listening to him say that, it had significance. At last, I said, Thank you. However, Ethan, I've moved on. An apology is not what I'm after. I'm just finished. A long silence. Next, softer, I get that. But I'm here, just so you know, if you ever require my assistance. I remained silent for a while. Then I grinned. Thank you, Ethan, and I truly meant it for the first time. Going ahead. The months went by. Despite its intricacy, life continued to go on. I poured myself into my work and gave my career my full attention. I had been running the restaurant chain for more than a year, and it was growing quickly. I couldn't afford to lose focus since I would soon have the chance to become CEO. What's the best part? I had no desire to, because I was creating something that was mine for the first time in my life. Not for my folks, not to win their favor, not for anybody else. For me, I was quite proud of it. Months went by, the seasons shifted, and I didn't turn around. I wasn't waking up with a tense chest, wondering what fresh demands my parents might make of me for the first time in years. I wasn't preparing myself for calls or texts that were filled with remorse that always began with, We need to talk, and concluded with You owe us. I had freedom. And liberty? It was incredibly satisfying. I felt calmer and more energized. I was eating and sleeping better, living a better life. I felt as though I had emerged from a fog that I was unaware I was in. The last letter, I hadn't spoken to my folks for 6 months. A day later, an envelope showed up in the mail. No address for return, however, I was aware of the sender. After a long while of standing there and staring at it, I sat down, inhaled deeply, and opened it. Linda, we are aware that what we have done cannot be reversed. We acknowledge that we let you down. We don't anticipate your forgiveness right away, or even at all. However, We simply wanted to say, now we see you. We recognize what you have done for us. We also apologize for not appreciating you enough. We hope you might be open to having us back in your life at some point. If not, however, we comprehend. Parents. I've read it once, then twice. Then, I gave it up, not with rage, not with bitterness. Acceptance only. The real story of forgiveness. I had yearned for forgiveness for years. To accept it, as well as to provide it. Whether verbally or non-verbally, I had pleaded with my parents to recognize me, to come see me, to accept me for who I am rather than what they would have me be. Ultimately, though, I had come to a realization. I didn't require their blessing. I didn't. I took my time answering the letter after reading it. I didn't suddenly drop everything for them and return to being their loyal daughter. Since I'd previously constructed something superior, something tangible, I had created a life for myself. Achievement, at my own pace. The restaurant I oversaw was doing quite well. I was formally offered the position of CEO shortly after that. Knowing that I had earned this, I signed the document steadily. Not by kinship ties, not by duty, not because of guilt, via pure perseverance and hard labor. What's the best part? I only had myself to thank. A note from Ethan a few months later, Ethan texted me, "Hello. I just wanted to congratulate you on becoming CEO. That is enormous. You have my admiration." I took a long look at the message before answering. "Regards, Ethan, thank you." That was it. No lengthy speech. No superfluous words. Just tranquility. Because of me and Ethan, we had changed from before. We weren't anything, though, and it was sufficient. A final call after several weeks, my phone rang. "Mom," I paused. Then I picked up for the first time in months. "Hello?" The breath on the other end was unsteady. "Then it's me, Linda." This time, her voice was different. Smaller, softer. "Mom, what do you want?" My voice was even as I asked. A long silence. Then, with a voice full of shame, she uttered, "I know this is a long time coming, but I just wanted to apologize." She gave a quick exhale. "Everything has been on my mind, and I am aware of how badly I have treated you. I don't think you'll pardon me. I only want you to know that I apologize for everything, for everything." I felt a peculiar spectrum of feelings. Relief, sadness, but no rage. No more. I inhaled deeply. "Mom, I won't forgive you immediately. I understand," she muttered. "I understand." Another pause. Then she said, quite quietly, "Linda, you are loved. Additionally, for the first time in my life, I trusted her. The best thing, though? Her affection was no longer necessary for me to feel validated. The future is mine. I didn't return to being the self-sacrificing daughter. I didn't erase the years of suffering or forget what had happened. However, I did proceed. For me, because I wasn't looking behind me for the first time in my life. I had my eyes on the future, to my self-constructed future. And at last, I was free.